The Michael Berry Show.
Some of our best show prep comes from listeners. That's why I read every email. The perspectives people have when there's a fire and a firefighter writes in, or where there's a response to a crime and police officers will write in, or when we're in the middle of war and veterans will write in. Sometimes it is that you've discovered a podcast and the host would be an interesting guest, and why they would be an interesting guest. So Scott sent me an email. I don't know Scott. And he said, Czar, I'm emailing about a recent book release from a fellow named Dr. Greg Gifford. It's called Lies My Therapist Told Me. I think he would be an amazing interview on your show, and it's the sort of things you like to talk about. He went on as to why this would be a particularly good guest, from a Christian counselor, professor, and podcaster, a critique of the mental health establishment from his perspective. And I said, you have my attention. Therefore, our guest is Dr. Greg Gifford. Welcome to the program.
Thank you for having me.
Why did you need to write a book? What was the purpose? What did you hope to accomplish? I mean, it's a pretty eye-catching title, Lies My Therapist Told Me.
Right. Well, I wrote the book, first of all, because counselors often are dealing with the downstream issues of how to counsel somebody and how to help somebody with anxiety or depression. But instead of focusing there, I wanted to actually get at the upstream issues of why is mental health getting worse in America? Why is there a complex, an industrial complex that's growing? Why are more people on psychotropics? And instead of doing the how to help someone on psychotropics book, I wanted to try to learn why is the problem getting worse? So really that question sent me on the maybe downward spiral or the trajectory of writing this book.
And let's talk about how that came to be. Why is that the case?
Well, as I began to read and learn how the mental health movement came about, it came down to the father of the mental health movement, Clifford Whittingham Beers, and he started using the term mental and brain synonymously. So he would talk about mental hygiene, for instance. And the mental health movement was actually the mental hygiene movement to begin with. And he started using things like medical doctors for the mind and wanted us to implement a psychiatrist, a medical doctor for the mind, as Europe was already doing. So he's saying this in the turn of the 20th century and saying we need medical doctors for our minds. And I began to think, oh, that's interesting, because as a Christian, the Bible teaches that the mind is immaterial. It's part of our inner person. It's not a physical reality. It's an immaterial reality. So that little nugget started to become the mind versus the brain. And are we talking about a brain issue, the organ of your brain, or are we talking about the mind, the immaterial aspect of who we are? And because the mental health movement has combined those two, there have been many misdiagnoses which lead to wrong prognoses as well. If you get the problem wrong, you get the solution wrong every time.
Do you think that these errors, as you see them, or poor courses of action, are by design or by default? How does this end up happening?
Yeah, I mean, this is me speculating on it, so I think that's a fair question, Michael. The reality is I'm usually a pretty charitable person, so I'm not typically skeptical or overly cynical. So that means that I don't think it's by design. I think we live in a naturalistic world looking for naturalistic explanations of why we face what we face. So if you're going to just come up with a material solution, then the mental health enterprise is a natural answer. And why do we do that? You go back to Darwin, the physical is all there is, the material is all there is. So there must be a physical or material reason for why I'm doing what I'm doing, why I'm sad, why I'm anxious, why I'm struggling with past experiences. There must be a material reason. And that's where the blame it on the brain mental health complex really comes in.
Yeah, and one of my great frustrations with the medical establishment, I'm not familiar with your body of work, but one of my great frustrations is an over-reliance on pharmaceutical products, an over-reliance on things that cost money when there are things that are free or very little money, more sleep, more water in your diet, that there is this dependency on billable items for industries that have so affected sort of traditional physical health. And what I'm hearing from you is that's also true for mental health treatment. I don't want to put words in your mouth.
No, right. I make that case in the book. There's a section on incentivized diagnosing. And I show, these are factual. So there are many people who will disagree with my conclusions, but these are facts that you really can't get around, which is, number one, you have to find a diagnosis, a mental health diagnosis, to bill an insurance company. And what are you getting paid for by the insurance company? You're treating depression or ADHD. So that's one incentive, and it's a huge one, especially if you're spending 17 minutes with your doctor, who then finds a code with which to bill your insurance. Mm-hmm. Second is schools have to test, and in order for you to get additional resources, you have to either have a learning disability or some mental health impairment. So now we need a diagnosis to get you a tutor, so to speak. And that's an incentive, whereas we could just get you the tutor and not diagnose, but we need that diagnosis because of IDEA.
Right.
So there's like 3 or 4 different examples where I show that this isn't even the nefarious side. Inevitably, the total depravity of man, it means that we are bad in every way, and that does mean there are individuals in the secular mental health enterprise that are in it for the money, and they're in it for a career, or it's the psychotropic, industry where you're making money off of antidepressants. Of course that exists. And so then a Christian just has to be discerning. It's like, well, here's what happens. You get an arbitrary mental illness, and then my psychiatrist makes money off of this arbitrary illness. And then pharmaceutical companies make money by me taking their antidepressant for the rest of my life. And this is incentivized for them, and I'm really the one losing in all of this.
Well, the frustration here is that we should all start from the premise that we want to provide health care for our friends, neighbors, family, and there are all these things getting in between. It feels like we're not making progress as a society because so many things we were once good at, we're less good at now. And I find that extraordinarily frustrating. Dr. Greg Gifford is our guest. The book is called Lies My Therapist Told Me. We'll get into more of those lies.
Listening to the Michael Berry Show podcast is sexy. Be sexy.
Dr. Greg Gifford is our guest. The book is called Lies My Therapist Told Me. This was a book that was recommended to me by a listener who had read it and found it useful. Greg Gifford, what do you want people to take away from this? Once we understand that there are lies our therapist is telling us, what do you hope to accomplish? What should the patient reader take away?
Well, if it is true that mental health diagnoses are on the rise and more people are on psychotropics than they've ever been at any point in history, we have to at least be discerning and skeptical and say, well, maybe the secular therapeutic enterprise doesn't know what it's doing. Is there something better? Is there a better alternative? And that's where I would say, yes, there is. The Bible, God has created us, and the Bible has better answers. And many have relegated the Bible to like cute Sunday school hour where we talk about Jonah and the whale. But the Bible actually addresses the deepest problems that we have and frames our anthropology, our understanding of ourselves, our understanding of change, the purpose of our life. So the takeaway for the reader or the listener is, I think we're all sensing there's something wrong with the secular therapeutic. Would you be open to seeing what the Bible has to say about your problems?
Yeah. Maybe the problem is that people are bifurcating church and Bible study and their personal faith and their personal Christian experience and separating that from healthcare, when maybe you're saying there should be a better blend of that, because the Bible is more than telling us to be nice people or 10 commandments. It's telling us how to live our lives. I don't want to put words in your mouth, but
Right.
I'm trying to figure out
No,
your
yeah,
expression.
exactly. So tease that out. So then think, all right, when I go to church on Sunday and my pastor preaches on anxiety, do I draw a line between that and say, well, he's not a mental health professional, so he doesn't really know what anxiety is like? Or do I say, wait a minute, maybe my mental health expert, my therapist, psychologist, psychiatrist, maybe they really don't know what anxiety is, and my pastor is teaching me directly from God's word. So if you're not careful, this is really a view of the Bible that we're getting at, where do you believe that the Bible tells you everything that you need to know for life and godliness, or do you believe that it tells you everything you need to know for Sunday morning, sending out a missionary, maybe Sunday school teaching? But when it comes to the real issues of life, the Bible is inadequate, or the Bible doesn't talk about those things. That is the doctrine of the sufficiency of Scripture, which is that God has provided in his word all that we need for life and godliness. And that's my basic contention. Even if a reader doesn't agree with some of my data, which are all cited, or if a reader doesn't agree with the difference of the mind and the brain, do you believe as a Christian that God has provided in his word all that you need? And if the secular therapeutic's not helping you, would you just give it a shot? Would you be open to it? Because if you have this secular sacred divide, you're going to see your pastor as being well-intended and the Bible as being good, but just not adequate. And what I'm saying is the opposite, where it's like, no, the Bible is adequate, and not only adequate like it's enough, but it's actually superior than what we are hearing anywhere, especially in the secular therapeutic.
So what would be an example of that? What would be a problem where the Bible is enough and we don't need a drug, or we don't need the secular approach?
Yeah. So currently, generalized anxiety disorder is an actual mental disorder, and you could go to a psychiatrist, medical doctor, and be diagnosed with generalized anxiety disorder. But if you're using that term anxiety in the same way that the Bible uses that term anxiety, this is a Matthew 6 issue or a Philippians 4 issue, which is, I don't have a medical problem. I actually have a faith problem, and there is room for repentance and growing in trust in the Lord. So if I'm not careful, I go to my therapist and they tell me I have a medical issue and I can't control it and I can manage symptoms with medications. Whereas the true biblical answer is, if we're talking about anxiety in the same way the Bible talks about anxiety, I actually need to repent of that and grow in my trust in the Lord and put on a vision of who God really is as sovereign and wise and good. So the wrong diagnosis of generalized anxiety disorder, it's going to lead to a wrong solution. And for reframing this then, think of the implications of this, Michael. So now instead of me finding transformation or healing or total growth, I'm managing symptoms for the rest of my life of GAD. Mm-hmm. Whereas what the Bible offers is that you can actually be transformed, which is totally new, made new, or restored to a mint condition. So I'm not managing symptoms for 30 years. I'm actually a different person. So it's even a much more hopeful model if we'll just go back to the Bible instead of letting the secular therapeutic be our authority.
It's very interesting. What about your thought on therapists who may say that they bring a Christian approach or a biblical approach to this rather than a traditional or more common secular approach?
Right. That is true. There are individuals who have been primarily trained in Rogerian counseling, humanistic psychology, psychoanalysis, whatever field that they've been trained in, but they're a Christian. They believe in Jesus. They believe in salvation by faith alone in Christ alone. So that's totally true. The question is, what pair of eyeglasses are you using? Are you using Abraham Maslow's pair of eyeglasses? Are you using Carl Rogers or Sigmund Freud's, or are you using the Bible as the eyeglasses through which you're viewing the problem, the solution to the problem, and how to actually maintain, so your methods for change long term? So if a person's saying, you know what, I'm using the Bible as the lens through which I'm viewing everything and helping my counselees or my clients, then I would say, good for you. Like, that's the way that it should be done. But if you're sprinkling a proverb into your counseling and 99% of your counseling is actually what Abraham Maslow said, or call Roger said, neither of whom were believers or claimed to be, then you're not really doing what you're claiming to do. You're inserting a proverb here and there about whatever topic, and then you're primarily using the worldview of Rogers or Maslow or Freud.
It's very interesting, because it does strike me that many people sort of have compartments in their lives. You know, here's the compartment for church and Bible study and the Word, and then here's the compartment for during the week, and I stop off at counseling on my way home when I leave early on Thursday, and that those two would not be the same, where at least for a believer, you would have to think that you would want the consistency, because they're very different messages and they're very different medicines.
Right.
And
Right.
it's a very, very interesting perspective. I'm out of time. The book is by Dr. Greg Gifford, Lies My Therapist Told Me. Giving us a lot to think about. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Representative Jackie, are you here? Where's Jackie?
A crash that killed Congresswoman Jackie Walorski.
Michael Berry
I
Show.
don't think she was going to be here.
You know what? They told me I haven't done this story, and Jim got his feelings hurt because he worked up this story, and he says I didn't do it, and I swear I did. But the only reason I don't mind is I love that dang song. That's why we let it play out so long. I love that dang song. Anyway, let me tell you the story about Sister Girl. She is a Kentucky woman who caused, I swear I did this segment. If you say I didn't, I didn't. Maybe we did it for the evening, didn't do the morning, or did the morning, didn't do, I can't remember. Anyway, Kentucky woman causes over $1,000 in damages to a Little Caesars in Louisville after losing it over the $1,000 extra sauce charge. How do you do $1,000 in damages to a Little Caesars? I mean, you had to burn the whole place down. According to court documents, Brianna Haynes placed an order over the phone and went to the store to pick it up. When Haynes asked for extra sauce with her order, an employee said it would cost $1. Popo said Haynes, quote, created a disturbance in the store, end quote, over the $1 charge, and began knocking things off the counter, including a custom-made computer stand and the computer register, which totaled over $1,000 in damages. Sister Girl left the store, but employees were able to provide Popo with her name after comparing video surveillance with a known picture. She was charged with criminal mischief, but was not arrested until another incident. According to court documents, she threw a brick at the father of her child's car because he wanted to move back to Cincinnati. Popo said this incident caused more than $1,000 worth of damage. She was charged with assault and criminal mischief. You know, you kind of almost get the impression that this is almost a savage animal that is incapable of making advanced mental deliberations with regard to conflict resolution, don't you? The story from WDRB TV in Louisville.
Accused of trashing a Little Caesars because of an extra charge for sauce. Police say Brianna Hayes asked for extra sauce with her order and was not happy when she was told it would cost $1 more. They say she started knocking stuff off the counter, including the register, which ended up causing more than $1,000 in damage. This incident happened back in January. Hayes was charged with criminal mischief, but was not arrested until another incident on September 22nd. She is now due back in court tomorrow.
Online, it's known as black fatigue. That's what they call it. How much you want to bet old Brianna, Sister Girl, is a great big fat woman?
Oh, wait. Was she a great big fat person?
You found a picture of her? All right, well, let me see it. Oh, yeah, she's a big girl. When they got a temper like that, 9 times out of 10, tearing up a store like that, she's going to be a big girl. She's going to be a couple hundred on the hoof for sure. I don't make up the rules, Ramon. I don't decide how big they're going to be. It just turns out they're going to be that big. You remember that story about 5 years ago about the pizza joint that caused a stir with their billboard about fat people? Do you remember that?
I thought it'd be a good idea to put some funny signs.
I think it's cool as ever. Yeah. I do too.
We pulled in and I saw it. I was laughing. I said, that is just fantastic.
They're just advertising and trying to get people to notice them.
And I never even thought about it in that way. As soon as I thought it, because kidnapping is not a joke, we're taking it down.
I think a lot of people are going to be offended by it, but I mean, I don't think it's a big deal. It's advertisement, it's marketing, you know.
I never even thought about it as the kidnapping aspect. I just meant it to be funny.
There's a comedian named Kyle Kinane. I think he'd be kind of an ass in person, but he's got some funny bits. He has one bit called Cutting Crew. It's about the song I Just Died in Your Arms tonight, and he goes to the cemetery. You got to hear it for yourself. But it's a really, really funny bit. I'm sure it's out there. Anyway, he has a bit about getting a pizza delivered, and when it arrived, they had not sliced the pizza, which sounds like you're quibbling, but I mean, think about it. If the pizza is not cut up when it arrives, I mean, you should have a roller, but what if you don't?
Then I was delivered an unsliced pizza. Everything you believe in just unravels. Everything you hold true. For some people, it sounds like a simple mistake. Not me. I took it personally. I was like, that's somebody down at Domino's making a judgment call on my life. That's somebody seeing my name come up on one too many tickets and finally just being like, listen, man, we know that you're probably going to eat this by yourself. More than likely all in one sitting, too, so... You know what to do, man. Just fold it in half and... Bon appetit. Just because they were right, I didn't appreciate the assumption. You don't know me, Domino's! Plump. This giant taco tastes like Italy.
There's a comedian by the name of Bob Marley. Yeah, that's actually his name. Who has a bit comparing ordering pizza to a drug bust.
You ever eat pizza? That's good, isn't it? Oh, my God. You ever get excited when you order a pizza? You're just sitting around the house and you look at the other people involved in the deal. We're going to get a pizza? I love you! First thing I do after we order the pizza, I take off all my clothes. That way I don't have to answer the door when the pizza guy shows up. Then I go and I sit on the couch and I wait for my pizza. Do you ever notice from the time you hang up the phone until the time the pizza guy shows up, the only conversation you have is, where in the hell is our pizza? That's pretty bad, isn't it, fatties of America? There's people starving to death all around the world. People waiting for a bag of flour to fall out of a helicopter. Do you know how many beers I've had to drink while I wait for this kid to show up? It's great when he finally shows up, isn't it? It's so exciting. It's almost like a drug raid. Ding dong, he's here! Get the money! Get the money! Hide the dog! Hide the dog! Who is it? The pizza guy! Flush it! Flush it!
Bring it on.
What would you do with a brain if you had one?
Bring it on, because there is nothing here.
The Michael Berry Show.
There are certain things from history that you don't just say, well, that's history, and move on. The Holocaust would be one such example. The coronavirus and the quote-unquote vaccine and the mandatory jabs and the lives lost, the lockdowns. These are things you don't simply move on from. You learn from. But before you can learn from them, you have to face painful realities. And you have to pick at a wound that a lot of people want to move on from. That's not how you progress. George Santayana famously said, those who do not learn the lessons of history are doomed to repeat them. Often the very people who want to, quote, move on don't want to bear responsibility for what happened. Nick Saban and other coaches will tell you that some of the most important coaching you do of a team is not during the game, but after the game. When you come in and watch that painful game film, and you see what you did that you hope nobody noticed and how you failed here and came up short there. It is very important that we go back and understand what happened on January 6th of 2021. It's important that we understand what happened and not be told what happened by those with an agenda, but that we do our own research and we ask questions of various people. One of the most important voices in all of that, who has seemingly been silenced officially, is Stephen Sund, who was the Capitol Police Chief at that time on that day, and he's our guest. Chief, welcome.
Thank you very much for having me on, Michael.
Let's start with how you ended up the Capitol Police Chief. Leave January 6th aside. I think you were a Metro police officer in D.C. before that. Talk about your career. Why did you get into law enforcement? Do you have family in it? And then just walk me through your whole career there.
Absolutely. I mean, get this through as succinctly as possible. So I did 25 years with the D.C. Police, and I got into policing because my dad had actually gotten sick early on. He had gotten leukemia. He was a B-52 pilot. He had been sick for a number of years, but passed away when I was 16. So after we got back from the funeral, we just happened to be visited by two friends of ours that we used to live with right nearby in California that became Fremont police officers, Carol and Brad Nini. I still stay in touch with them today. They had reached out and came to visit. This was the same day that we had buried my dad. And as a young 16-year-old, that was a very pivotal part of my life. I looked at it and said, you know what? I think I know what I want to do. And from that point on, I was pursuing right around 23. I applied to a couple different departments, but DC Police picked me up. Started there right around 25. By the time I went into the academy, got out and patrolled as an officer in what they call the 6th District, which is Anacostia, one of the most violent parts of Washington, D.C., was there for a couple of years, made sergeant, went to 70, which is also one of the most violent parts in Anacostia, South Anacostia down by South Capitol Street, Congress Heights. Patrolled there for a little bit and then started rising up through the ranks, became a lieutenant. And then I got assigned downtown for a little bit and went to Special Operations Division, where I kind of stayed from lieutenant on, doing all the major events, major demonstrations in Washington, D.C., made captain inspector, became commander of the Special Operations Division from 2010 to 2015. And that's when I retired at the end of the very last day, December 31st, 2015. I retired. We had the Pope come visit in October, and I figured it's a good time to head out. Went out and kind of worked a little bit in the private sector for just about 8 months, and then the House and Senate Sergeant at Arms approached me to come over and become the Assistant Chief of Operations for Capitol Police. And January 7th, I started in 2017, started at the U.S. Capitol Police just a few days before Trump's inauguration. And I'd been involved in, it's probably my 5th or 6th inauguration I've been involved in planning of. So they brought me in right before that and was there. And then in May of 2019 became the chief and started revamping a lot of operations and capabilities. And then January 6th happened, and I was removed from the position the very next day by Speaker Pelosi. And I'm sure our conversation is going to cover a couple of things along there.
Absolutely. But before that, let's set in place our procedure so we know the context within which we're working. I was with Senator Cruz at an event in Milwaukee a few years ago, and he had a large contingent of Capitol Police, and I learned that those are assigned based on kind of death threats, and it's all on a screen, and it turns out he was getting more death threats than Pelosi and every other member of Congress combined. And it was kind of interesting to me that was, that unlike the president, which is kind of, designated Secret Service for the president, it was sort of, where is the threat right now? It might be Jasmine Crockett on Monday. It might be Ted Cruz on Thursday, or whoever that might be. But talk to me about how the Capitol Police Chief is hired and to whom they report and take orders.
Okay, and you're absolutely right about what you just mentioned. We do statutory security details for the leadership before on the House and the Senate side, and then others based on the threat. So you're absolutely right there. So the Capitol Police Chief, and it's interesting. It's not like any other police chief in the country. I report to a Capitol Police Board. They're the one that hire and fire me. Oh, we'll get into that too. they're the ones that really have the hiring authority, but they only do it with the approval of Senate leadership and House leadership. So when I was first hired, you had, Schumer was over on the, for the chief's position, Schumer was over on the Senate side and Pelosi was on the House side, and they both had to approve my hiring for the position. So you go through, and what's interesting to understand is the Capitol Police Board is made up of 4 individuals: the House and Senate Sergeant at Arms, who are considered to be the lead law enforcement agent for the House and one for the Senate. So when you think of the chief as the top law enforcement official for the legislative branch, I'm sorry, when you think of the chief as the top law enforcement official for the legislative branch, that's not the case. The Senate and the House Sergeant at Arms actually are above me. The third person in the Capitol Police Board is the architect of the Capitol, and then the fourth person is the chief of police. The 3 people that are politically appointed, the House and Senate Sergeant at Arms, the architect of the Capitol, all have a vote on how things go for the Capitol Police, and they control everything from schedules to which doors we cover, which equipment we can use. If I want to get my officers tasers, I had to go to the Capitol Police Board and get approval, and then I had to go to my oversight committees and get approval for them. If I wanted to deploy fencing, I got to go to the Capitol Police Board. If I want to, pretty much all operations has to be approved by the Capitol Police Board. So that just gives you a little bit of an idea of what I'm dealing with. As the chief. It's very political. It's very political because the House and Senate Sergeant at Arms, who carry most of the weight, don't want to do anything that's going to upset their congressional leader. So we may be having a hearing on the Supreme Court justice being nominated, and I want to put up certain fencing. Well, one side may want no fencing put up so protesters can come in and, cause problems, or the other side may want to shut down all the buildings for public entry so we don't have protests.
I think that's going to be a good segue into our next discussion point. Our guest is Stephen Sund, who was the chief of police of the Capitol Police on January 6, 2021, that fateful day. We'll talk about his perspective, which I bet you haven't heard and may be surprised by, coming up.